Hello and welcome to the Low Carb Conversations podcast. Our guest today is Keith Norris. He and his wife, Michelle, are the founders of the annual Paleo FX conference in Austin, Texas. It's very popular. It happens every year. And he also is the author of a brand new book called Primal Uprising, the Paleo FX Guide to Optimizing Your Health, Expanding Your Mind, Reclaiming Your Freedom. Welcome to the show, Keith.
Holly, thank you very much for having me. I'm stoked to be on.
Yeah, and we have Leah with us today too. Hi, Leah.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Holly. Hi, Keith.
Hi, Leah.
G'day, mate.
Right.
G'day, mate.
So I am so excited to actually have you on today because, like you, I'm deeply passionate about the same things as you, about empowering people to take control of their health and claiming freedom that comes along with being holistically healthy. I absolutely love your book. And I feel like it's more of a comprehensive guide on escaping what you call the human zoo, or what I refer to as the sick care system. Or that sick care health model. And so many people find themselves trapped in it. And so I love your book because it's really like soup to nuts, what you need to do to really take control of your health. But the whole time I was reading the book, I was wondering about the timeline of when you wrote it to when it got published, because I feel like there's so much in there that takes on an entirely different meaning and context after everything that happened last year in 2020 and is continuing to be revealed now, even in 2021, as we're kind of peeking behind the curtains of what's going on here. And in terms of like the guidelines that have been set for us in terms of what we need to be making decisions for our health and for our freedom, there's just a lot of underflowing currents going on. So can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration for the book and when did you write it?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting story. So actually the idea for the book has been floating around for 5+ years. And we had an agent who shopped it around for the last 5 years, and she said, I love this idea. Don't let this idea die. But this is a right idea. It's just the wrong time. Right now, people are too essentially fat, dumb, and happy. She didn't use those terms, but she said, there's no financial strife. Everybody's just kind of cruising along. Nobody wants to hear that they're locked in a human zoo. Nobody wants to hear any of that. She said, I get where you're going, but let's just kind of sit on this and see what happens. She said, eventually something will happen. Eventually the economy will turn. So, of course, she had no idea COVID was coming. But she said, something's going to happen and let's just sit on this. I'll continue to shop it, but don't lose faith in this book. It's a great idea. So, 2 years ago, Michelle and I were at an event, which turned out to be the last event of the year that we went to. It was in Park City, Utah. And this was in February, I think it was, of that year. And we got notice that from a friend of ours who was plugged in that South by Southwest, which is the largest event in Austin, and it's an event that takes place about a month before Paleo FX, that the city had just essentially shut South by Southwest down. They wouldn't let them hold the event that year. And we thought, oh, okay. And we knew that we were at that time the third largest event that happens in Austin. It's South by Southwest, and there's another music festival. It's called ACL, and then it's Paleo FX as far as the hierarchy of large events. And sure enough, by the time we got home, we had notification from the city, and they laid out stipulations for events at that time, which were ridiculous. There was no way we could meet those restrictions, and we had to pull the plug. And we were devastated because February, March, and April are our biggest income months. As event producers, you have to pay forward an event, and you hope to make a profit on the back end. That's just how events are run. Everything gets paid forward, and you hope to so 80%, 85% of the income for this event comes in the last 3 months leading in. So we were totally clipped at the knees. It was a very, very tough business environment to be in. We had to lay off employees. So many people who had been with us for years helped us bootstrap this. It was excruciating to go through that, not to mention the specter of bankruptcy and just everything else involved in that. The bright side to all of that was it wasn't a few days later, we automatically had a bidding war going on this manuscript. so on the one hand, we just completely lost an event business. On the other hand, now we have a bidding war going on for this book idea. We finally signed with Ben Bella, who gave us what we thought was the best offer. We great people who were willing to work with us. And Ben Bella told us at that time, this is kind of a good news, bad news thing. What we want is for you guys to write this book and release it at the next Paleo FX, which would have been 2020. So we said, okay, that's great. Let's do this. And of course, they said, the best thing you can do is take your advance, go sequester somewhere away and just hammer this thing out. And that's essentially what we did. We went to New Mexico, we got a place in New Mexico, and we just pulled ourselves off and wrote a 260,000 word manuscript in about 10 days. We were contracted for 75,000, so we had to cut quite a bit. And we had a wonderful writer who was helping us. Her name is Eve Admonson. Shout out to Eve for enduring all of that with us. It was a tough run of writing and editing. But that's the short story of how it came to be. And eventually we whittled the 260,000 word beast that we had written and got it down to 90,000 is what Ben Bella finally accepted. And, we've got enough for 2 more books in all of that. And we did go way beyond what you see in Primal Uprising. We went way beyond. And the publishers were like, this is book 2, 3, and 4. Right, let's stair-step this out. So we cranked it out, and the reason we did that is because we live this lifestyle, we breathe this lifestyle, we know this intimately. The people we work with, and we do personal coaching with people. We coach people personally to live this lifestyle, to empower themselves, and to make themselves sovereign. And when we work with people, we tell in a one-on-one situation, we work with people with pretty severe traumas that we work through. We tell them at the end of this, we don't want you to rely on us. We're going to put you in a position to where you rely on you. You've got your back. We're your friends, yes, and you've got your back. You've got this. You are soul sovereign. You are empowered. You've got this. And we think that everybody, regardless if there's an underlying trauma that they're trying to work through, can live the same way. And that takes a questioning mind. It takes critical thought. It takes the wherewithal to question a quote unquote authority, to question quote unquote experts, because they are just people. Right? They're people just like you. And, they may have more education in one way. They may have more knowledge in one way, but I can guarantee everybody has a special kind of knowledge. And, everybody can critically think, everybody can question. And that's really the root of empowerment and sovereignty.
Yes, I love that. And I really like that you focus on teaching people how to ask the questions of others and how to critically think and to make decisions for themselves. Like, I think that is so important. And it's something that we've just kind of lost along the way, because we really haven't had to think or ask questions because everything is just handed to us. Totally. And we're just told what to do. And it's just so convenient to just expect someone else to tell us how to live our lives.
Right. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? So, you can look at this from the idea that the public school system has been subverted for this purpose. That's one way to look at it. Or you can say it was just accident of laziness. And, so depending on which camp you come from, the end result is the same. Kids these days are taught to essentially answer a question on a test, right? And it's memorize, regurgitate. Don't ask questions about what you're memorizing. Just memorize and regurgitate. Well, anything you learn in childhood naturally carries forward into adulthood, right? And so unless you unlearn that process and teach yourself a new way to critically think and ask questions, you're going to continue to do the absorb and regurgitate thing. So now you're absorbing from mainstream media and you're regurgitating what mainstream media tells you. And I don't think I have to go very deep to your listeners about what's happened with mainstream media now, and
Right.
and the types of censorship that are going on, whether or not these are private companies or not. Facebook, for example, and Google rule the roost when it comes to information. What am I trying to say? With the information output, right? They rule the roost. Yes, they're a private company and they can do what they want. And censorship in that area has done this to us, right? So we're only getting one side of the story. There's no debate about things. That debate gets shut down, and you see where we end up from here. All of that can be changed if people raise hell, right?
Yeah.
And it's not culturally accepted right now to do that. I mean, I have taken heat like you cannot imagine, and I'm like, I'm pretty immune to that. Bring it. I am not going to be silent. I'm not going to keep my mouth shut. I have an opinion, and that opinion, might grate your nerves a little bit. You ask, I'm going to tell you. And that's the other thing too, is I was very, very lucky when I was in school, especially in college. And I was a poli-sci major, a psychology and poli-sci major in college. And I happened to go to school at a time where debate was encouraged, right? And I think I just got very, very lucky. I went to school on a football scholarship. I had absolutely no idea of the academic environment of the school I was going to. I was going to play football. I had a totally different mindset at that time. But I happened to go to a school that was very, very steeped in their political science department about debate. And it didn't matter. And they would purposely put you on the opposite side, like the professor would put you on the opposite side of what he thought you supported. And they were so you would have to argue a point that you did not agree with, but you would have to argue it very, very well. So they gave me the ability to hold differing opinions in my mind and to see the validity of points of differing opinions that I might not agree with in whole, but there were pieces of it that I did agree with. And that's a balancing act. And I think it's very, very important for people to be able to do that. Very few things are black and white, right? There's always nuance. And to be able to sift through the nuance and debate the nuances and come ultimately to a conclusion, even though whatever you support might not be 100%, but it's the better of the two options because X, Y, Z, and all of these other reasons. That's a very important skill to have, and it's a skill that we've lost as a society as a whole.
It is, and I like that it actually can all circle back to the root of food, because coming to debating and critically thinking and making decisions and being able to look at opposing viewpoints and weigh them against your own and look at factions, that's hard to do if you're not supporting your body nutritionally. Totally. And so like one of the biggest reasons I got into nutrition was really not because I was interested in nutrition, but I liked the way nutrition was a kind of a neutral subject for people, because in general, most people are interested in learning how to eat, to be healthy, and to best support their body. And once you get them listening to food and maybe some of the weird politics that go into our food regulations and stuff, you can start opening their mind to other things. And there's all these different rabbit holes you can go out. But the foundation of it is if you're eating right, your brain is working better.
Yes.
And then you can start thinking better.
Yes. And I think that was one thing that brought me to the paleo movement so many years ago. And I came in like the late 90s into this and studying this and really diving deep and questioning, because I came from an athletic background and I knew how to cut weight for sports. And how do you cut weight? You cut carbohydrates. I mean, and so I knew the power of carbohydrates in the body, in the system, and I knew what they did. I didn't understand the exact mechanism, but I knew cut out carbohydrates, something happens in this black box, and the output is you drop body fat pretty quick. And that, so that's real world knowledge. I didn't know why. I had no clue why. And I mean, I just had a very rudimentary idea of how to manipulate body weight. And by the way, this had been known since the 50s in athletic community. That's how they cut weight. I remember being a kid from South Texas, we grew up on football. And when I was very, very young, I played Pop Warner football, which is kind of a youth league. And there were weight classes in this league. And I was always kind of a tall, lanky kid, but I was always at the max weight for my age. And I was always teetering there. And I remember my mom, before we had weigh-ins, what did she do? She cut out carbohydrates out of my diet, or she reduced them. She didn't totally cut them out, but she would reduce it. And that is just old school knowledge. She would do it herself when she was quote unquote dieting. If she had to drop a few pounds to go to a party and put on a dress, there went the carbohydrates. So people knew back then what carbohydrates did to the body. And again, they might not know what happened in the quote unquote black box, but they knew the result. Cut out bread, a couple days later, you've dropped a few pounds. Winner, bam. So that made me question the government's recommendations in the food pyramid. I was like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Whatever. I just kind of went on and did my own thing. But then when I started working with clients and I started to understand government policy as it relates to food, and then I started to understand the incredible, what I call medical industrial complex that's built on, in my opinion, making people sick and quote unquote making them a little better, but keeping them in the spiral of sickness and just keeping them above baseline. If we were to take that mechanism out of the economy would come to a halt. If you look at the amount of money that is spent in healthcare, in food and healthcare, it's astronomical. It's the largest portion of our budget. If everybody were to suddenly turn healthy, it would wreck the economy. It would totally wreck the economy, not to mention put scads of people out of work. So there is a vested interest in not, from the government's point of view, in not having people be healthy. So then you take that information and go, okay, well, what does an individual do about that? Well, the individual, from our point of view, starts to question. Why? Michelle and I raised 4 kids, and each and every one of them, we said, I will back you 100% if you respectfully question. It better be respectfully, but I will back you all day long if you get shut down, all day long. And we raised our kids to question authority and to question experts.
Yeah.
Respectfully.
I did too, but I'm starting to regret that now with my 10-year-old because
it's a slippery slope.
He's
right?
asking
because
a
they
lot
will
of
test,
questions.
they will test their boundaries. And I would always bring up respectfully, we can debate. You should be able to debate your teachers and people who are quote unquote in authority. There is no harm in respectfully asking the question. And if they don't answer or they put you off, there might be a reason for that. Either they don't know or they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes in some kind of way. And yes, it is a slippery slope, especially with their teenagers. But the upside of it when they become young adults is, I think it's well worth the aggravation as a parent when they're teenagers. Yeah.
That's what I keep reminding myself. I said, I'm going to appreciate this character trait when they're an adult.
Yes. And they will test boundaries, and that gives them free reign to, and I get it. Every one of our kids went through that.
At least I'm proud that they actually like have smart questions. I was like, oh,
Right.
okay. It's
And
like, good job, kiddo.
Kids are inherently so intelligent in questioning. That is a child's natural condition, is to question. Why? It's constantly. And that is something that we drub out of them over time. And it's sad to see that, because that is the natural inclination of a child. And by the way, it's a natural inclination of an adult. The curiosity, the awe, I've always thought that, the natural state of adulthood would be Montessori school, would be floating from subject to subject, and until you filled your bucket in that particular subject, and then by that time you found something else to dive into. That is a beautiful state to be in, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. In your book, you talk about the 7 pillars for being an optimized human. Do you want to touch on those a little bit? Give our listeners a teaser.
Yeah, sure. So these 7 pillars were the result of Michelle and I both in our own personal growth and in working with clients too. So in working with these people and in our own personal growth, there were what we thought were 7 different areas of life that kind of all came together in one sphere and made one. And if all of those were optimized, then one could live an optimized life. But if any one of these spheres, or pillars as we call them, were suboptimal, you could not make up for it by making another pillar super optimal, right? That's just not the way it works. So for me, as an individual, I could rock the physical side of things. I knew my body inside and out. I knew how to fuel my body. I knew that inside and out. And the mental side of things, I kind of had that figured out. I didn't have any issues there. I thought I had that pretty much taken care of. The emotional side, this was years ago. I was a guy. I was like, yeah, whatever, emotions, it's not that big a deal. Spirituality, I was a very spiritual person. I felt like I was solid there. But then things started to get wonky in the other 3. So for me, relationships and finances were my Achilles heel. The tribal side of it, or the community side of it, yeah, I had great friends. I was in the military. I had that side of it as well. But relationships and finances wrecked me. And that was my Achilles heel. And for a long period of time in my life, I tried to compensate for that in being even more physically fit and being even more quote unquote intelligent, and being even more and more spiritual and in that kind of way. And it did not make up for those other 2 areas of my life. And they really tormented me for a long period of time until I went in and did the deep work and figured it out. But in me, that's how those 7 pillars played out. And so for a long period of time, I did not live an optimal life because those 2 pillars in my life were dragging me down. And they were all due to self-limiting stories that I had floating around in my subconscious, that some were put there without my knowing. They just kind of got wedged there. I picked a lot up in childhood, and we can talk about the 0 to 7 age of the child where they're just little computers. They pick up everything. That's what they're primed to do, and that's what their brains are primed to do at that time. Some of those things that we pick up from that 0 to 7 period don't serve us. Right? They're faulty programs that just don't serve us, and they become very, very limiting stories in adulthood. And we see this all the time in the clients we work with. Well, I had a scads of self-limiting beliefs when it came to relationships and when it came to finances.
Yeah, there's so many things that we're exposed to at that young age where we wouldn't even necessarily remember, but our brains are kind of in like a state of hypnosis really throughout that young phase, and they're just absorbing.
Totally. And literally, if you look at their brain waves, they are in a state of hypnosis. their natural state in that age period is a state of hypnosis. And there is a biological reason for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our early humanity, it had to be that way so that we could acculturate a child into a tribe and have that child be a functioning member of that tribe and not be a detriment to that tribe, or a net negative, because they couldn't pull their own weight. They had to be taken care of. And our strong suit as humans is communication and coordination. Right? We're not the strongest, we're not the fastest, we're not anything like that, but we can communicate and we can coordinate. And those are our two strong suits. Well, to have somebody be able to do that, they have to come up very, very quickly and learn that process, that developmental stage. So it's a very, very important human characteristic. The issue is that in a tribal situation, everything a child picks up is valuable and needed, right? It's very, very simple. It's hunt, procreate, eat this, don't eat that. I mean, just the very, very basic stuff. So everything they pick up is very, very valuable. You put that same child in a modern environment that's chaotic and maybe not optimal. Now you've got issues because they're still picking everything up. And believe me, they pick everything up. They might not look like they are, but they are recognizing and cataloging everything that comes in, even if later they don't consciously remember that they have. But I can tell you, when we work with clients and you take them back, they remember everything. If you put them in the right state of mind, they can recall anything and everything.
Yeah.
So
and it's hard to imagine, like in our modern world, that we still have that tribal programming, but our DNA has not evolved as fast as our cultural settings.
Yeah, it's a very curious condition. I mean, when you step back and look at it, it's a very curious condition, and it's interesting. Certainly.
And we're overloading them now too. Like, we're just, here's a device, from at a baby. I need my child to be quiet. People are handing devices. And then we're flooding them with so much information that their little brains are even having trouble trying to compute what is real and now and what is in front of them in a screen.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that some of the clients we work with in a personal one-on-one setting, it's a lot. I mean, there is a lot to unravel there, and there are a lot of stories that are in the and by the way, we operate out of our subconscious mind. Depends on what studies you want to look at, between 95 and 98% of the time. We think we are walking around as conscious animals, and we're not. We are primarily subconscious animals, and we live by the stories that are running in our subconscious mind, most of which we have no idea how they got there, nor do we approve they're being put there. We just pick them up. And that goes into adulthood, by the way, too, if we want to get into messaging and all of that. And there is a very systematic way to go about doing that. So yeah, I mean, we can dive into that too, but primarily you're picking this stuff up between 0 and 7.
Yeah. I actually want to stay on children just for a little bit, because it ties in with the article that I have here.
Totally.
And that's what I was going to suggest.
When I first started my journey between, subconscious and conscious and learning all about that, when I heard about the 0 to 7 and that programming for children, then I freaked out, because I was like, what have I been telling my children? What have I been doing? But the good thing is, now, as we discover more, we can learn that we can reprogram those programs. So, but yeah, it's so fascinating, such a big topic. And this article that I have here, I guess they're like trying to test it again. So they've got 1-month-old babies, and they're putting them in scary situations. So basically they're getting a stranger come into the room and be near the baby, and the baby, seeing how the baby reacts. And most times, I think in this test, they didn't find out that the baby reacted at all, but they got the same stranger to go back out, put a Halloween mask on, and come back in. And then they measured the fear in the children then. And what they were testing was, they're looking to see if there's links in gut bacteria and fear. But really, this article has this research has a whole lot more going in it as well. And They were looking for implications on long-term mental health. So they're trying to see basically from that age, will it, carry on to fear, risk and anxiety later on and depression later on. And they were first inspired to do this testing after reading about the primal connection between animals, their bacteria and their survival instincts. And what they found out was they didn't actually see any relations between the microbiome and the stranger, like I mentioned, but they did see the response between the Halloween masks. So so let's talk a little bit more about what your thoughts around this is.
Sure. That's super interesting. So going back to the stage between 0 and 7, there is a very, very important bedrock stage that is in new infants, and that stage is called the imprint stage. So what happens with an infant, and I'm really like watering this down, truncating. What happens with an infant is it either bonds or it does not bond well with its mother. First, right out of the gate. If it bonds well and that goes well, most of the time the seed, and it's almost like a seed code within the psychology. That seed code is the world is safe and the world is secure. If it does not bond well, its seed code is the world is unsafe and the world is unsecure. And there's bonding patterns that take care of the male figure, whether that's a father or whoever the male figure is in a tribal situation. It could be all males, it could be a handful of males, but the primary obviously is with the mother. So if you were to take a child that did not bond well with its mother, who views everything in the world is shaky and unsecure, would that then potentiate an environment within the body that non-optimal gut bacteria could grow? So it's kind of like a chicken and egg thing, right? I don't know. I'm just proposing another mechanism of action. It could very well be the other way, or it could be a combination thereof. But I think it's a super interesting area of study.
Definitely. I think that when we're probably even going down to that level of the autonomic nervous system and we're looking at sympathetic responses here, we're shutting down all of our survival instincts. And when we've got, we know, like even in digestion, when we have low stomach acid, that's when, which is caused from a stress response most likely, then opportunistic bacteria can grow up or can, or not grow. Good ones can't grow, whatever's happening there. So maybe that's where we start seeing that connection between the gut and the microbiome, microbiome and the mental illness starting to come through.
Yeah, I see this, the more that I've always been very, very steeped in psychology, and I've always used deep psychology in every quote unquote job I've ever done. I mean, even when I was doing athletic training, it was, I tell people all the time, if you want a PhD in psychology, you can athletic train, you can strip, or you can bartend. That's real world experience in the psychological realm. And it's true. Most of the facilitators that I know that are like really, really, really good facilitators have come up through one of those routes. And I think it's just because it's OJT all day, every day. It's OJT with real world people with real world problems that you're trying to figure out. But yeah, I think this is very, very interesting. And what I was going to say was the more that I look at people as a whole entity of being both a skin and bones body and a functioning body and a mind and a spirit and a soul and the conglomeration of both of those two, I just don't see anything as being black or white, right? Everything is like a synergy. Everything is a give and a take. Everything is mutable. Everything is just in this flow back and forth. So I can see both sides of that, right? So I can see the imprinting possibly setting the stage for a lackluster, biome in the body, and I can see that exacerbated by the response and it just being a feed forward.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah.
And I guess, even relating back to children and then even relating back to digestion, the things that Holly and I work with on our clients all the time is about building resiliency, whether it's about,
Yes.
building the body to be strong enough through natural foods to be resilient to what's being thrown at it, emotionally being resilient, being resilient to stress that's being thrown at you, all of those things. And, we're passing that to our children as well. And so I know Holly's got quite a few questions to ask you about resiliency, since it's a big theme through the book as well.
It is.
Yeah, this other article here, I'll just do a recap for our listeners who don't have it in front of them. But the title of the article is Structure, Relationships, and Meaning, What We Need to Build Resilience During COVID-19. And the article is about, it's a Canadian article, and it's really reads more like a little bit more like a press release, but the Alberta government is hosting a mental wellness day for students, parents, and teachers, staff, and school staff who have coped with a turbulent year during COVID-19. And they're inviting in a guest speaker who's going to provide some insight to those individuals on what builds resiliency. When we think about resilience, the fortitude to overcome adversity, it's often linked to internal qualities such as personal grit and positive thinking, but it's not entirely what the research is suggesting, according to this article. And while these individual traits are important, they are less flexible than external factors, which they say play a crucial or an often overlooked role in building resilience. The article expert even suggests that this means governments, communities, families, and institutions play a role in providing people with the tools they need to keep going.
Sorry, my dog's, she sees something outside. Sorry about that.
We thought she was agreeing. She's like, yeah, I'm agreeing.
Yes. If my dog started barking, the whole room would shake. But anyway, so yes, as Leah mentioned, your book talks a lot about resilience, and especially throughout your 7 pillars, you talk about building resiliency within those areas. So what are some of your thoughts around building, let's just say, with mental resilience?
Sure. And I'm glad you brought up mental resilience, because I was going to go directly there. So there are 2 different pathways that a person can become, let's call it hard to kill, to use a different term than resilience. We used to always joke of, why do you train so hard? Why do you eat healthy? Why do you do these things? And I would say, because I'm going to be hard to kill, right? I'm going to be hard to put down, kind of in a joking way. But that lends itself more to just resilience. It lends itself to adaptability as well. So, truthfully, in practice, from a psychological standpoint, there are 2 different pathways to dealing with a stressor. One is resilience, and one is adaptability. And they're 2 different pathways, and they even operate differently in the brain. There's 2 different pathways. So, for instance, if someone is high stressed, if someone is having emotional issues, if someone is, even suicidal, even, they will be given, in Western medicine, an SSRI, Prozac, something of that nature. That particular medication affects the resiliency pathway. Resiliency is the ability to withstand an assault, right? It doesn't mean you'll get better from it. It just means you can withstand it. And oftentimes what happens with people, they're withstanding it. The only way they can do that is to dumb down joy and happiness and all of these other emotions. So what happens is, if someone takes an SSRI, they become flatlined. They don't feel the pain so much, but they don't feel joy either, right? They're just kind of a flat line. So that's why many people cannot stay on those medications, because they cannot stand that feeling of just being dull. So I would say, and I always define resiliency in that way. The adaptability pathway, which is affected more by psychedelics, psilocybin, these types of things, that is the adaptability. That is the brain's ability to go, oh, here's a stress. What can I do about this? How can I maneuver to reduce this stress? What can I do? What's a new action I can do to avoid this stress? How can I How can I transmute this stress? How can I learn from it? All of those types of things. It's a completely different pathway. So there's an adaptability pathway and there's a resiliency pathway. Both of them should be optimized for sure, right? So if you go into this a little deeper, you have the Nassim Taleb. I don't know if you're familiar with this author. He's the author of Black Swan. He's a very, very intelligent guy. He's a statistician. He's an excellent author. He coined the idea of anti-fragile. So anti-fragile is so there's resilience. So you can think of a palm tree in a hurricane, right? The palm tree sways and it does the same. It's built to be resilient because it grows on the coast. It has to withstand storms. And so it's built in such a way to be resilient. Something that is anti-fragile would be like your immune system. The immune system gets stressed and it gets even stronger from that stress. The palm tree doesn't get any stronger. It's resilient, but it doesn't like somehow adapt and become stronger because it weathered the storm. Your immune system does. That's being anti-fragile. And in my mind, being anti-fragile is boosting both of those pathways that are in the brain, ergo in your physiology as well, of resilience and adaptability. Both of those are very, very important. And I probably just totally did not answer your question, but that's how I consider resilience and adaptability and anti-fragility.
No, I like that. And I think I'll start using anti-fragile. I like that.
It's
especially like that image. Yeah, the image of the immune system too is just
it is.
It's good.
You know, nature, if we look to nature, nature has every answer we could ever have. If you want to know about being anti-fragile, look no further than the immune system. That teaches you everything. Oh, that's what I would need to do to be anti-fragile. I could endure a stress and become even stronger from that stress. You know, and that's the basis of athletic training, right? Stress on the body, recover, stronger than you were the day before. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's anti-fragility. Someone who is resilient would go through training, get no better, but they made it through the training, and they'll make through the training if it's not any harder the next day, and they'll make it through the training if it's not any harder the next day, but they wouldn't get better. That's being resilient.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It's easy to like point out the negatives of the last year and to focus on all the things that went wrong. But I feel like a lot of really good things came out of 2020. And whether it is people buying up all the trailers and moving on to start their own lives of freedom, or taking their health more seriously, or just starting to pay more attention to what's going on in the world around them. I think those are actually some really good things. What are some positives that you can take away from this last year? What are some blessings that people can focus on going forward? Because I feel like there is a lot of negative that comes at us. Let's talk about what are some of the positives.
Now, some of the positives from my point of view, I can tell you an overview from my point of view, and then I'll kind of dive in personally. But exactly what you said, there is a large swath of people who have finally taken their health seriously, right? They realize, oh, this does matter. This really does matter, because a healthy body can withstand stresses a hell of a lot better than a body that is unhealthy, right? This is the resiliency and adaptability and anti-fragility idea, all right back again. Another thing I see is, and maybe I live in a bubble because of the book, that I see so many people now who are like, you know, you're right. Just because someone is a quote unquote expert, they should be questioned. You know, who deemed them an expert? You know, is there an expert committee somewhere that says, oh, this person is the expert on finance, and you know, he is, whatever he says is golden, and you can't question this person? You know, and more people are waking up to that. More and more people are waking up to the idea of critical thought. Right? Does this idea pass the smell test? Right? Can you do basic critiques of an idea? Can you untangle an idea and dive in deeper and ask questions? And not be afraid to ask questions. And I think that's one of the big things is it's been made to be unseemly to question somebody. I got over that a long time ago, probably way in my youth, but I have no problem questioning somebody. I'll do it respectfully, but you're not going to pull the wool over my eyes without being completely questioned. Respectfully so, yes. And I respect your PhD. And here's the question. So those are golden. I think also people are really, really, really valuing their communities now.
Yes.
Really valuing. And I know our community has gotten stronger out here in Austin, outside of, we call it our soul fam. It's our soul family. It has become so tight-knit, so strong, so solid in the last 2 years. And, that wouldn't have happened without what we went through, because we were good. I mean, everybody's flying around doing their own thing. Yeah, we had friends. Yeah, they were tight, but it wasn't as tight as it is now. Now it is, who your ride or dies are. You know who they are. You know who's got your back. You know all of that. And it's a very, very tight community. And that's a beautiful thing. And this happens too. And I don't know if you've ever read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger.
Mm-mm.
It is a beautiful book, and it talks to exactly that, about how in wartime or natural disasters brings people together like nothing else, because they have to come together. And they will tell you after the fact, and I know this from being in the military myself, some of the hardest times of my life were spent in the military. I mean, just emotionally tough. And I miss that camaraderie, because you can't replace that in the modern world. You just can't replace it. But when you're in a situation where you trust your life to somebody and they are trusting their life to you, you can't replace that in the modern. And that is such a tight human bond at that point. You can't replace that. And there's something to that when it's taken from you, you miss it. And so you find yourself in this weird psychological place of, and this would happen to me when I would come home from deployment and I would be back in the luxury of the US. And after a few days, I cannot quit thinking about going back on deployment. And I thought I was crazy. I thought it was absolutely, who in their right mind would want to go back to that? But there was just this draw that I didn't understand. I understand it now. I understand what it was. I yearned for that camaraderie. But that is how strong Tribe is.
Mm-hmm.
When you suffer something like we've gone through, a natural disaster, anything like that, you will come together with your tribe. And this is I'm calling this now, 10 years from now, people are going to look back to this time period and say it was the best time of their life. That's what people who know what tribe feels like will say about a natural disaster, will say about wartime, will say about those things 10 years after the fact, when it finally settles in and they have time to integrate that and go, oh, I get what it was. I had to rely on other people. That's what it was.
Yeah, I will definitely agree.
Right.
Yeah. The relationships and communities in my life strengthened so much just in this last year. Yeah. All right. I want to wrap it up, but I do just want to say that for people that may have just recently taken the red pill and compared to those of us who took it years ago, if you're looking for ways to get more answers to the things that are going on in the world right now, and just find some solutions to taking control of your life and being more empowered to your health, to your finances, to your relationships, and just having more freedom, then I definitely recommend picking up Keith's book, because it does a good job of just kind of explaining it all in a way that makes sense and in a way that you can follow instead of leaving you wondering and questioning. Keith, where can our listeners find you?
That's a good question. I am kind of on social media a little bit. You can find me personally at Theory, the number 2, and Practice. You can find out about PaleoFX on Facebook at the PaleoFX page. You can follow PaleoFX on Instagram, just as it comes out, PaleoFX. It's interesting the way that I utilize social media is I utilize social media for personal contacts more so than anything else. And this is just a way that I have leveraged it so that I don't get sucked into the rabbit hole. But I have made so many friends that are face-to-face friends now through social media. For me, it has been a net positive in my life, a net positive, because I've met so many awesome people through that realm that I would not have met otherwise. And they have become very, very close personal friends, face-to-face personal friends. So all that is to say, I don't spend a whole lot of time on social media. Most of my time on social media is in the DM and the messaging side of it. Every now and again, I'll post stuff. And I'll probably post more now that the book has been released, just because you got to do the marketing thing and get it out, wake people up. But yeah, Instagram is probably where I'm most active.
Okay, well, we'll make sure to link it up in the show notes so people can find you. Leah, do you have anything you want to add before we say so long?
Sorry, I was just going to say, I was just going to say, thanks, Keith. It's just been such a great talk today. Like I've been listening most of the podcast and really listening to what you're saying. And I think that people are going to take so much inspiration and draw really on this conversation to take action, to question respectfully authority.
Totally. And I would just say in closing that I totally respect all points of view if they have arrived at that point of view through very rigorous critical thought. Then I can appreciate it, even if it's counter to what I came up with. But if I can have a discussion with somebody about what questions they asked and why they asked certain questions, really the outcome to me is irrelevant, because that's where the juice is. What questions did you ask? Why did you ask those questions? Did you ask any questions at all? Or did you just take everything hook, line, and sinker? That's really what I want to know. And I think, if I could distill the book in one couple of sentences, it would be that. Tell me the questions you asked, because that is telling. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on today, Keith. It's really been fantastic. We appreciate you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Leah.
See you later, mate.
That is the end of today's episode. Our theme music is created by Andrew Bowden, and production services are by Kevin Kennedy Spain of Disc of Light Media. Have a great week.
Have a great week.